Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of September 18th, 2023. This meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion with board members attending via Zoom, in person, or on the phone. Our packets were distributed in advance. If anybody did not get those packets, let us know. And there were no changes to that package at that time, correct? No other additional mailings. All right, we'll have a roll call of the board of directors at this time.
Okay, roll call. Brian Noggle.
Here.
Amir Famili.
Present.
Ted Lyons. Linda Rosenfeld. Here. Norman Cusick.
Here.
Evan Baker. Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Sean Ziller.
Here.
Mark Grammas.
Here.
All right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 board members.
Okay, we have a quorum. All right, let's review the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Any need for executive sessions?
No executive sessions today. We do have one item, informational item that we'll cover under staff comments. And that's all I have.
Okay. All right, now we move to the approval of the minutes, but we have no minutes from the last meeting. We will get those later on, I take it.
Yeah, we'll do 2 sets of meetings, meeting minutes at the next meeting in October, since our meetings are back to back.
Since we're only 1 week from the last meeting. Public comments at this time. Anybody have any comments to make on non-agenda items?
No, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, anybody else? Okay, then moving on to action, the discussion items under finance and administration. We have 2 items. The first is the 2024 budget preliminary review, which is discussion on.
Okay, so for this one, we have a revised presentation of the budget. And we're going to get to that in just a sec. I just wanted to also state that we have a full printed preliminary package of the budget that is handed out at this meeting and will be mailed hard copy to the board members who are attending by Zoom, and is already posted and available on our website.
Yes.
So that's the opening piece, and I'll get the presentation up ready.
We're going to focus only on the areas that have changed, or review the whole package.
So, well, what we're going to do today is focus a little bit more on the numbers, since the last time we focused more on the assumptions. But we're going to start with some review of those assumptions. And as we did before, I'll kind of kick things off with some of the review of those budget assumptions and strategic items, and then Ed will get into the details on the numbers. So. Again, today we're going to focus on the strategic initiatives, the staffing changes, and the other assumptions, and start to get into the fund financials. We'll display them in summary form, and then you have them in more detail in the paper copy that y'all have. At the next meeting, we will go through the numbers again and any refinements that have been made since that time, as well as take a look at grids. And then we go into a later in October. It's just the flow of things. So we spent quite a bit of time last meeting talking about the 2023 strategic initiatives and where we've come, how far we've come and what the needs are. I don't want to spend a lot of time on those items because we did cover them last time, but really just wanted to recap what we talked about. So for 2024, looking forward into this budget, we have 6 top priorities that we've identified. They're listed here. We talked about them last time, but spanning the whole scope of our strategic plan: water and sewer capacity, process improvement, operational excellence, safety, which we broke out into its own category, asset management, and employee engagement. As it relates to the budget, this is really where the rubber meets the road, is what are the resources that we need to be able to implement and deliver on these top priorities. So This is the same information that we shared with you last time. We have 12 items that were identified within the capital plan that relate directly to those strategic initiatives. They're listed here again. They're also in some detail in the capital plans that you're reviewing, and we'll look at for board approval at the next meeting. And then we spent more time on this one where we talked about in the operational budget for 2024, the things that we're suggesting be included. There's some staff additions here for supporting our planning program for the a planning engineer related to water and sewer capacity. We're also requesting a staff addition to manage our lead program. And 2 maintenance technicians are the 2 staff additions here that really focus on increasing our preventive maintenance activities within asset management. And then we have some other funds that we've included in the 2024 budget proposal related to the emergency response plan, so safety training and support, and then also some increased education and training and an internship program. So just wanted to highlight those again as some of the key strategies that we've been focused on and how they tie into the 2024 budget. Since we talked about this one a little bit more detail last time, I wanted to share just a couple of pieces of information related to the asset management program and specifically how it relates to maintenance. This graphic that's with the graphs or the pie graphs and the other graphs are from our key performance indicator dashboard that you receive quarterly on our strategic plan. And just to kind of give you the highlights of what this shows. So the bottom graph where it shows the 0 to 100% of program design, this really is intended to indicate how far along in defining the maintenance program are we within our CityWorks program or our maintenance management system. So you can see for the field services program, we have about 82% of the program designed into the CityWorks program. And on the plant side, we're a bit further behind at 39%. So what this tells us is that we still have a lot more work to do to get the program fully developed and into the system. But when we look at the pie graph at the top, these pie graphs show PM is preventive and CM is corrective maintenance activities. And so there's a relationship here. So of the 82% of the field services program that's defined, this is our performance. So we have 43% showing up as preventive and 57% as corrective maintenance. That's the work we're actually getting done. On the plant side, 53% is preventive, 47% is corrective. So this tells me a couple of things that number one, our maintenance program is still under development. And another key point is the water industry benchmark from the American Water Works Association is to try to achieve 66% preventive maintenance as your target for a maintenance program. So we're a little behind on that target in both areas, field services and our plant operations. And there's just some data and background to show you, and really why we're thinking about the addition of the 2 maintenance technicians is to try to help us get further along on the preventive maintenance side, get this program fully designed and implemented, and try to achieve that target benchmark of 66%. So this is the same slide that we showed last time, showing the staff additions, the 4 staff additions driven by the strategic plan that I just reviewed, and then some other ones that we talked about, the solicitor position and an inspector position for new development and customer service. And then we talked about our internship program that we're proposing. The details still need to be worked out, they're under development, but want to make sure there's resource available for that in the 2024 budget. And then before I turn it over to Ed to get into some of the details, I made an adjustment to this slide to try to capture a little bit of the discussion that we had about the offsets to the personnel costs. So what we're showing here is, this is the top numbers show the total personnel all-in costs, what we pay our employees and the full cost of benefits, et cetera. But there are some significant offsets and wanted to just highlight those. So we have capital salaries that are charged to reimbursable projects as an offset. We also talked at some length about the inspector and plan review process, and that's reimbursed by the developers. So in our 2024 budget, we're expecting about $1.6 million of offset to this personnel cost.
So we have 7 people, correct, total we adding.
Yes.
So 7, the full cost for all included benefits, everything, FTE cost is $200,000 average.
A little bit less than that.
200, so 7 times 200, we have $1.4 million extra SG&A that we're adding. That number doesn't match with the $1.4 million SG&A increase, or our math is incorrect.
No, it would be a little bit less than the 200. So let's just say that when you're adding a person, you're adding about 125 maybe. And with 7 people, you keep in mind, there's another factor here is we're going to bring on all the open positions that we had in this year to the picture as well. So you're going to have some residual effect from that. In other words, being around for a full year instead of partial.
Okay.
So and that's a big amount.
Okay, so that, okay. So actually, year-on-year increase, if you have full staff, is less than 14%. Is half
Yeah,
percent.
yeah, actually,
7%.
it would be much smaller than that because you would be talking about maybe $800,000 brand new position.
We have been showing forecast to budget throughout our presentation, so we thought to do it here, but we also have some of the charts, I think, Ed, you're showing budget to budget, which shows it a little bit different.
I think it is good to clarify that, so some people online or public, they don't see a number 14%. In reality, what facts is here, we have vacant position last night that we not filled in the process of filling those positions because of the market environment, hiring people. So in reality, our increase based on what we want to do is 7% rather than.
Yeah, you're spot on.
I just want to make sure we clarify. So when people see 14%, sometimes is that.
Yes, it doesn't match with only 7 people if you say it's
Correct.
going up
Yes.
14%. And yes, you're correct that there is the residual effect of that. Well, we started the year off with 18 openings, so.
Yes,
So-
okay, I just want to clarify that.
Thanks, Amir. Okay, that's all the recap and the little extra pieces that we wanted to supplement with. Ed.
So I think we covered some of this before. We talked about the inflationary impact. We're still sticking with the 4% for right now. Again, there is much discussion amongst all the experts about where this year is gonna play out. Something 3.3, some 4.5. And some people, experts out there will say that we're gonna get down to 2.5, but that's not gonna happen overnight. So trying to factor in all the things, I think it's best for us to stay on a somewhat conservative basis and stay with the 4% inflationary rate. In terms of where we're going with the operating revenues, well, city division will be based on the lease agreement, and suburban division is mostly signatory agreements that play into that, and then suburban water, we are looking at a 5% need for additional revenue dollars.
And if you don't include a rate increase, right, put the rate increase aside for time being, what is year-on-year revenue increase that we
basically in suburban water, you would talk about revenue growth of maybe 1 to 2%, which would be just solely based on volume. If you went to suburban wastewater, that would be somewhat dependent on how much capital is getting built in. In other words, what we gotta do and what the agreements allow us. If you try to take capital out of the picture, I think you would see that it goes up, it goes down, depending on what's happening with what sewage flows and I'll call it loads. And on the city, I would have to say that for a period of time without the agreement, the rates by agreement, we would not have been able to afford some capital. But the fact is right now, we need the rate increase that's in the agreement to cover a significant increase in capital needs. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Maybe I could just supplement, answering it a different way, in that the city division, we have negligible, less than 0.5% of customer growth. But on the suburban division, wastewater and water, we're seeing that 1.5-ish per year of volume growth. So certainly not enough to sustain the cost.
I'm just trying to think of future going forward. You know, you have one lever that you have is rate increase. The other lever you have is growth of your revenue, you know. I'm just trying to see how in the future, I'm just trying to have a base point right now. We have total maybe 1% revenue growth. But as we go forward years, you know, how we could, is there a possibility? I know it's very limited customers, you know, you can't go and look for customers, you know, customer has to come to us, you know. So that was my.
Yeah, but I mean, you're kind of hitting on something. I mean, that depends on what happens in the total growth of the area.
Yeah.
In terms of what businesses come in, what follows the businesses as a fallout from that. Certainly, like I've said, 1 to 2%, and that's
Okay,
been kind of a steady average.
okay.
So that would be an expectation that we would use.
I think the other piece too, Amir, to your question, is that if we don't spend the capital on the projects related to capacity expansion, in particular the 537, then there's really no opportunity for growth. So,
Yeah.
good.
So this is what internal services would look like. I'm just talking, big hitter will be trying to departmentalize what we're doing with respect to last year, this year, to get to where we have some responsibility, reporting and accounting. That will be very dependent on where we get to with Munis, and that is the intent of the re-implementation. The non-personnel costs and internal service are up about 25% from 2023. Obviously, you've got an inflation impact in there, but if you start to go back to some of the strategic initiatives with respect to some of the programs, education and training, we have built a chunk of money into training for safety. Specifically, we want to roll into some really good training on confined space and lifting. And that's just one program. We want to do a lot more in terms of the safety activity. We are obviously experiencing an increase in insurance premiums as a result of the inflation on what the insurers now call appraisal value. So our premiums have gone up. That's kind of the big hitters in there, including all the strategic imperatives that we went through, where we're bringing on consultants. So we'll get into suburban water. So this one had an operating expense increase of 15.9, and I'm comparing to 2003 forecast, 23 forecast. They're getting fair share of the additional personnel in internal services costs, again, inflation impact. At this point in time, we have $818,000 worth of costs built into water purchases, which is now being looked at in terms of our ability and how we want to mechanically take some capital project money and spread that. The capital budget is $7.1 million, so we are going to need to borrow $5.2 million from new borrowing, and addition, like we talked about, additional revenue growth of 5%, which is really 1%, maybe 4% impact on rates. And actually, at the end of the day with this one, when I did all the budget, it looked pretty similar to the capital plan forecast too. So these are the numbers. So you can see the operating cash flow, the operating revenues of $18.7 million is up from forecast and also up to budget. Operating expenses of $12.7 million, again, up from budget and forecast. The non-operating revenues / tapping fees, developer reimbursement. We're saying that might be down a little bit as compared to 2023, certainly better than what we budgeted last year. This one doesn't have any annual payments. So where we get to is at the end of the day, we'll have $6.2 million of money available for debt service, projecting the debt service with the borrowing of $5.2 million to be 3.4. Negligible working capital effect. I think that's rounding. And so we should be left with $2.7 million of money available for CAPEX. Hence the reason why we need to borrow $5 million to cover the CAPEX spending of almost 7.1. So that leaves us with, well, we'll have almost $1 million worth of net cash flow, and the operating metrics will not look all that bad. Operating ratio will be above 1 at 1.16. Debt service coverage ratio will be at 1.8 versus internal target of 1.2. Obviously, we're not getting a lot of money from that current rates toward capital, which is why we're borrowing. The good news is we'll still have 302 days cash on hand, and we still have almost $3 million worth of invested balances in case there's a rainy day. As we look at some of the expenses, you can see altogether compared to forecast, we're up by $2.2 million. If you look at the miscellaneous service line, that is where the water purchases would be. And there were also some significant increases in materials and supplies as in this fund, we'll still have to have some increase. We'll have some increase related to chemicals and purification supplies. The rest of it is coming from what we're doing in personnel to support the strategic imperatives and also the G&A that's coming over from the internal service fund. The inflationary effect be almost $500,000 at 4%. As you look at the volume variances, after you strip out inflation, you got $1.7 million worth of higher expenses. Again, most of that in services, and then again personnel and G&A as compared to the $1.9 million against budget. This is how I got to revenue requirements, very similar to what I looked at when we were doing the capital plan. So to get to the 5.0%, you're starting with the operating expenses that you built into your budget. You can take out non-cash item for depreciation and amortization. Now you got to cover your debt service of $3.4 million. You're going to pick up some of the 20% additional money you need for coverage requirements and covenants. You can take away the system charges, take away the interest income, which is a big number. add back in capital spending, which is project specific of $6.6 million, and then some of the admin of almost $500,000, and take away what you are going to borrow for, and then add back in what we lease on the balance sheet for some of the mobile equipment / fleet. So when you do all that happy math, you get to $17.2 million, and that compares to where we think we're gonna be this year at 16.4, meaning that we need almost $819,000, and that is how you get to 5%, attributing 1% of volume related, get you where we are with the rates. So that's a pretty simple mathematical model that we used, both cap plan and how I looked at this fund, so. These are some of the capital numbers.
Sorry.
That was some of the capital numbers. In terms of the dollar amounts, we're talking about annual projects, maybe 2.5, very similar to what we budgeted this year. And then you get into some of the bigger projects where main replacement at 2.9, water meter replacement projects of 800,000, well improvements of 150,000, and some of them adding up to almost $4.2 million. And again, given their fair share of G&A, get you to $7.1 million, which is a little bit up from where we were in 2023, but less than where we were in 22.
All right, so we added graphic to this. Trying to find a place for my little toolbar here. Sorry about that. Added this graph to show some historical context based on some of the questions that I think we were asking and talking about last time. What I wanted to show with this graph is over time how we're doing with revenues covering expenses. And so we'll see one of these for each of the three funds, and they all kind of look a little different and tell a different story. For the suburban water division, I think there's a pretty clear story. If you've been here a little while, you may remember in around 2019, 2020, we started really talking about how we use rates to cover capital and wanting to have our rates cover more of our capital program. And we started implementing more aggressive rate increases, which you can see the line, which is our total revenue line. You can see that the revenue line starting to increase more sharply in that 2021-2022 timeframe. And you can see that worked to cover our expenses, including capital. And but over time that's eroded a little bit. The last 2 years we've tried to keep rate increases a little more modest because of the sharper increases we did in prior years. So we're eroding our coverage on capital by a little bit, especially this year, as our operating increases our operating expenses are increasing at a little faster rate. One thing I wanted to note about suburban water, having been here a long time and seeing where we've been, you may recall we went for a very long period of time where we did no rate increases. And so we were artificially keeping rates very low, and as a result, also keeping our operating expenses very low, not fully staffing our maintenance programs, not fully achieving everything we need to achieve in the system. And as the system has gotten older, we've had some additional needs to build into the operating budget. So some of this is a little bit of a balancing of that and getting our system and our capacity to where it needs to be to, fully maintain the system. So I think some things we'll need to look at in the future is just really what's the future trend for operating expenses. You can see the small blue bar at the bottom is personnel, and then the orange bar is the services, purchase of services. portion. And together, those have increased pretty dramatically over the past, 8 years that are shown on this graph. So we'll need to be watching that and making sure we manage that. This is something new that we put together for this year's budget presentation. If there's any questions on it?
I just have just a general question. So in each fund, every year you start out with a cash balance. So is that money gets encumbered for maybe capital that wasn't done? Is it going into the rainy day fund, the emergency fund? How do you handle the starting cash balance?
Depends on how much it is, first of all. So, what I've tried to do with the invested balances is not, anytime that they convert from investment to cash, trying to roll them back, because I'm afraid of that circumstance where you have a system issue and you need $3 million that you didn't count on, and you have that 3 million. So at this point in time, I'm kind of staying put with what we have in invested balances. As I look at how we use the existing cash reserves in the mix of rates, well, the ultimate goal is to make sure that we maintain an adequate days cash on hand. That is an important element, especially if we need to do what we're doing across all three funds, like borrow. And trying to borrow $5.2 million, as I'm sitting with S&P and a lot of other people as they're trying to look at how to rate this business. When they start to see a steady stream of metrics, they get a whole lot more comfortable with what we're doing and how we're managing the business. So that's a key element there. And if I remember right, we were at 300 days. So that's kind of what drives how I think about the fund. Is if I use up all the reserves and then I'm sitting there with 10 days cash, that could be a problem. And so we try to maintain 180 days. In this particular case, because of the borrowing, kind of left us with a little bit more, but you just never know. That's kind of how I look at it. Hopefully I'm answering your question.
Yeah, I just didn't see any on you had your spreadsheet of how you came up with the rate, and there was really nothing. Like starting point is basically zero, right? That you're
Yes.
that you're not, that you didn't go over budget last year, and you're not ahead of the, so you're starting at basically zero.
Yes, and in a situation, you're mechanically in a situation, if I had $5 million of excess money sitting in there, there'd be a line item under that calculation and say, how much reserves are we going to use,
Right.
not put it into rates.
Thank you.
Okay, wastewater. Operating expense increase of 5% from 2023 forecast, so obviously not as large as we just went through. Again, a proportionate share of internal service costs, personnel costs, there is an inflation impact, 4%. Capital budget 11.2 is going to require $6.4 million worth of borrowing. The additional revenue required, and this is all based on the agreements, now based on flows, loads, and then based on what capital we build into it, comes out to be 11.5. And signatory rate impact will be varied again by that PAYGO CAPEX impact. And I believe we do this in early October. So in terms of what the cash flow looks like, so we're gonna budget $22.8 million. And I can assure you that we don't have the $2 million worth of double counting that we had a problem with in 2023. So we made sure of that. So at 22.8, operating expenses excluding D&A would be 14.7. Not much in terms of other revenues and expenses, and net available for debt service will be 8 million. Projecting debt service to be 1.1, that includes the borrowing. I do have a little bit of non-cash working capital changes coming in, mostly related to, again, fleet. And then showing no change in investing. And then borrowing of $6.4 million against CapEx spending of almost $12 million. So that should leave us with $1.4 million cash reserves. As you look at the metrics associated with that, we're above 1 for DNA for operating ratio. Debt service coverage ratio will be 7, and that is even with borrowing $6.4 million. Capital coverage ratio, a little bit higher than Suburban was. You're capturing a little bit more than half of capital requirements to the rates. Again, partly because of the way we handle the signatories. Days cash on hand will be 287. And we have $7.1 million worth of unrestricted investment balances, which we will use up over a period of time for 537 work as that moves on. In terms of the operating expenses, you can see $1.0 million as you compare the 2024 budget to forecast for this year. Up is treatment and transportation, miscellaneous services is up as well, in addition to the personnel and G&A that we talked about on the strategic imperatives. The inflationary impact, regardless of whether you're comparing a budget or forecast, would be $566,000. And then as you get into the volume, that's $467,000 of a volume effect against forecast. And I believe that comes out to be like on a volume basis. I got my notes here. Give me 1 second. That should actually only be a volume variance of 1%. So you're getting nailed more by inflation than you are true spending volume in this fund. Okay, in terms of capital spending, annual projects are in the neighborhood of $900 some thousand. Obviously, that's up compared to a year ago that we budgeted. Wastewater treatment plant, we plan to spend $1 million versus the $750,000. Then as you go down the WLI system, you can see a couple of big hitters there with signatory I&I program, Trexlertown, Spring Creek improvements of $1 million. And then the big one being upper Western Lehigh pump station and force main, $3.5 million. So there's $6.4 million worth of projects just in the interceptor system group. As you go into the satellite systems, I guess the big hitter there would be Lynn Township, and I believe that's clarifier related.
Yes.
And then there's a couple, Heidelberg Heights at 160 and Sand Springs with additional expenditure there. So on the satellite group, it's almost $1.2 million and then $1.8 million on the Little Lehigh Relief Interceptor group. They get hit for the other half of the G&A on the suburban side, so $11.7 million of capital, which I think is first time it's gone over 10 in a while.
Right, so with this revenue and expense trend, you can see it looks quite a bit different than the suburban water one, and really it does tell I think a very different story. For the most part, you see the revenue line is very close match to your expense line, and that's a product of the intermunicipal agreements that are set up to cover expenses. So the anomaly that we see here in 2019 is really related to some projects we did in our satellite systems and drew on reserves for those projects like the Sand Spring and Windwood projects. So that's why we see this anomaly here in 2019. So in this system, the operating expenses are a little more flat. And it's really the variability on the CapEx that drives things here. What we're seeing in 2024 is a more significant jump in CapEx, and the fact that our revenues are not covering the full amount is due to the borrowing that we're planning to do. So as we move forward in suburban wastewater, we really see this huge project load coming at us from the 537 plan. We want to really take a careful approach to looking at how we use reserves, build reserves, and how we finance. So the graph moving forward could look significantly different. Any questions on this one? City.
So on the city side, operating expense increase of 6.9. How did I believe in 2022 in there? I don't know.
I didn't
We
catch
have to check him out.
Sorry.
Proportionate share of personnel and internal service costs and inflationary impact is similar to the other funds, 4%. Capital budget is a big number. I mean, $32.6 million. So we will borrow $8.6 million through new borrowing. City rates is done by formula with a CPI of 2.2 plus the 2.5 built in. So you get to 4.7%. And this was the final step in amended rate implementation. So the total impact is 10.9%.
We're gonna cover that in a little more detail in October.
Cash flows. $65.3 million of operating revenues. You can see that that's up from all categories prior. Operating expenses, 24.3. We do have some non-operating stuff, which is tapping fees, etc., developer reimbursement, project reimbursement. We will owe them $1.3 million as part of the annual payment, adjusted for inflation. So that should give us $40.7 million left for debt service. Debt service I'm projecting to be, even with borrowing, to be $16.3 million. $100,000 worth of expenditures related to leased vehicles, fleet. So at the end of the day, you're going to get $24.3 million of money left for capital. You can see the borrowing of $8.6 million and then a big capital number of $32.6 million. So we should come out with a positive number of $274,000 in terms of cash flow. Operating ratio, that's a pretty good number at 1.9. Debt service coverage ratio, 2.5. That's also good. Capital coverage ratio, that's 75%, 0.75. Days cash on hand, 233. So all the metrics look good. I can say that this might have a little bit of revenue upside. When we looked at the budget, I think we might have missed an increase in one of the categories, residential. So I'm going to take a look at that, and maybe this goes up a little bit. In terms of operating expenses, $2.2 million unfavorable variance to forecast. I'm just looking at my notes again. So you got a 4.0% inflationary effect, and when you strip that out, you end up with a 2.8% unfavorable volume variance. So which is not a bad number. So and there's the inflation impact of $1.1 million, and then volume of less than 3% takes you to $1.2 million unfavorable to forecast. Big hitters, again, services, personnel, G&A, very similar to the other two funds. But this one has the second lowest volume spending variance. Capital spending, $2.7 million of annual. That's up pretty well compared to 2023. In terms of the non-CCRC, so funded by LCA, $830,000. Big one there would be a large valve replacement program. Then you got indenture upgrades and tank reservoir rehab. In terms of the CCRC projects, well, the big one would be the lead service line replacement program. And hoping to get some grant money to fund that. And the other one would be water main replacement of $4.8 million. Altogether, the CCRC stuff would be in the neighborhood of 13.4. Administrative projects would be $898,000. So in the water side only, you're at $17.8 million. That's just water. In terms of the wastewater, $2.7 million worth of annual. Major capital improvements of $8.8 million, topped off by I&I source reduction of $3 million. Electrical substations of 2.2 and boiler replacement of 1.4. That is $8.8 million worth of money on the wastewater side. The 537 projects include metering of 600,000 and miscellaneous planning of 200. So on the wastewater side, you've got almost 15 million or $14.8 million worth of capital projected. So altogether for the city, $32.6 million.
And I wanted to comment, just learned on Friday of last week, this I&I source reduction program, $3 million is one of those outstanding grant applications that we have through the H2O PA program. We're hoping for a decision in September, and the Commonwealth Financing Authority met last week and pushed the decision to November. So we will not have that answer in time for this budget to be approved, but the project needs to be done. So we're assuming we need to finance it.
So if it's not, if we don't get the grant, we have to go borrow money for the project.
It's included in the entire, that's one of the projects we didn't, we assumed we would not get grant funding in how we put the financing together.
Yeah, so yeah, that's part of the borrowing.
So all this project that you have, that we are not sure that you're going to get the grant or not, that's on the part. Okay.
Yeah.
So depending upon whether we grant or not, your borrowing will change. Is that correct?
That is correct. Are your favorite trends?
Yeah, so this trend graph, once again, looks very different from the other two, and that's why we really do need to look at these funds kind of differently or separately. I think there's a pretty clear story that's being told by this particular graphic. And if we look at the early years of this graph, we see a number of years where our revenues were falling pretty far short of our total expenses. And we were successful in renewing the lease agreement with Allentown in 2020 to address that issue. And then we began to see the revenues increasing and providing better coverage for our capital program. So you can see in that 2019-2020 timeframe, we really shrank our capital program just to meet what we had coming in for revenue. And now we're able to build that back up and get more projects done. One big glaring difference in this graph versus the other two is the big green bars in the middle, which are the interest expense or the debt service piece of it, because we do have such a heavy debt load in that system, and the rates need to be adequate to cover that, as well as the operating expense and capital. What we see happening now in 2023 a little bit, and then more significantly in 2024, is the need to begin borrowing for more capital. And we have some capacity to do that. As we're looking further out with, again, this project load that's coming with the 537 program and some other initiatives, we certainly are going to need to look at our existing debt structure, opportunities to refinance to make those green bars smaller, where we can. And,
Yeah, okay, I did talk to you all before about a potential refinancing on the city side, which would have been the remaining 49% of the original 2013 A bonds that were not retired when we did the financing. And as it's become plain as could be right now, now's not the time to do that. So we started, we didn't spend a lot of money on it. We tried to slow roll it. It would, I guess that was the smart thing, was to slow roll it. We didn't invest a lot of time and effort into it. And at the end of the day, we'll take another look next year sometime. Maybe March, when we start to see some change in the economy, we'll look at that. But one of the things I wanted to bring up is doing that, and then looking at when we did the 2020 refinancing, we kind of moved a lot of money to the right in the payment window. And with all the 537 stuff coming into play, we might need to reconsider some of that stuff. So it'll be twofold. Number one is to get back in tune with better economic conditions. And number two is maybe realign debt service better with 537 needs. Sorry.
no, that's good. There you go.
So this one I'll go quickly. I mean, net income is $14 million. All three funds are positive. And in terms of cash flows, same thing. All three funds are now positive, which I like to see. The debt service coverage ratios are all good. You can see the amount of capital. In terms of the forecast that we compared to, you can see that income is down a little bit, as we've talked about with suburban wastewater having that $2 million issue. But cash flows in 23 are all better than what we budgeted across suburban water, wastewater, and city. So I'm kind of liking that. The debt service coverage ratio is better than what we budgeted, except for suburban wastewater, but still at 9.45 is still good. And you can see the capital is kind of hovering where we thought we budgeted right now. That's a quick run on that one.
All right, so we gave kind of a high level look at all three of the funds. The details are in the printed packet that you have. Next time we'll be working, or between now and the next time, we'll be working on finalizing those budget requests. I think we also have a little bit of homework to do to pair up what we're proposing in the 2024 budget for capital with the capital plan. Because we're kind of did them at the same time this time around, and we'll be asking for board review and approval of the capital plan at the next meeting in October, and want that to be in sync with each other. We'll be working on the rate calculations for suburban water and the city division to share with you at the next meeting. Suburban wastewater rates have already, for the most part, been done and communicated with the signatories, but we want to finalize that report and get that to you. And then we'll look for approval toward the end of October.
Packet that we received has got an awful lot of very small numbers, but are big numbers. And
Big small numbers.
yes, can we get a copy of the presentation package to the board members, which just kind of helps us focus on
What do you mean? You want a printed copy of it?
printed copy.
Okay.
At least I want it. Anybody else?
You want a printed copy of the PowerPoint?
PowerPoint presentation that was just presented.
Did you send this to us?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's posted on our website and sent, but we can
Okay.
print for those who need it.
So I don't have to print it.
Okay.
How are you gonna get all this capital work done?
For 2024,
It's a lot of work.
It's
a heavy
$51 million
work.
worth of work. This year was like 27.
I mean, we have, there's some big projects like Ed mentioned. We think we have the resources now to get the 2024 work done. When the avalanche of projects hits related to the Act 537 plan, then we'll have to talk about additional personnel.
You can do it with the existing resources and
At this time, yes.
we are conducting or just kicking off a staffing analysis that we'll hope to have done by the end of this year that we can share with the board regarding staffing needs for our future strategic initiatives, and certainly the project load is a major concern.
Especially the lead service line program.
Okay, any questions from the board?
Just a quick question, follow up what Brian said. Have you gone through the process of prioritization and say, okay, if we don't have resources, this thing can get delayed, this has priority. Have you gone through that process or not?
Not really. I mean, all the projects that we have in the plan are high priority projects. We really don't have any nice to have placeholders in there. So it's all stuff that needs to get done, whether it's regulatory or asset management related. We think it's all high priority.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you for the detailed presentation, appreciate that. All right, moving on, also under finance and administration, we have resolution 9-2023-1. Destruction of authority documents seeking approval. It's a yellow documents within our package, digital board package, pages 3 to 5.
Yeah, so this is become a standard process for us. We were doing it once a year, and we decided to do it a second time because we had some documents that were requested for destruction. So it's just in accordance with the Pennsylvania Municipal Records Act to have the board officially approve the documents that would be destroyed. I make that motion.
Second.
Need a motion made by Linda and seconded by Amir. Resolution 9-2023-1, destruction of authority documents. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Moving on now to water, we have one topic, Allentown Division Emergency Declaration. Union Boulevard and Dolphin Street main break, seeking approval. It's the blue documents within our board package, digital board package pages 6 through 7.
All right, and Chris Mon is on the line to review that. Please.
Thank you, Lisa. On August 25th, our city crews were dispatched to a report of water in the street near the intersection of Union Boulevard and Dolphin, right at the New England Bridge. Once the excavation began, it was quickly determined that a 12-inch water main had broken. It was installed in 1922. Once they got down into the ground, they realized with the proximity to the bridge and the magnitude of the break that our crews were not capable of performing a full repair. So at that point, the LCA crew cut and capped the east side so that the surrounding businesses could have their water turned back on. We had multiple crews on site for 24 plus hours during this repair. On the west side of the bridge, it was a little bit more challenging. So we had to pull in Shoreman Excavating, and they came in early Saturday on August 26th to install a valve and a single-use blow-off. What this did was it allowed the single and last customer that had their water turned off to be put back into service from the night before. During this whole 24-hour period, Jerry Travala and the operations staff was in touch with our engineering team, and it was determined pretty quickly that outside engineering support would be required to repair this 12-inch line. In the midst of all of this, Phil DePoe was working with Gannett Fleming to see to have them run a hydraulic model for us to see what effects there would be having this line down and how long we could sustain that. It was determined by the water flow analysis that we were putting an additional 3 high-risk dead-end sections of the water distribution system, and probably the most important part was a reduction of 500 gallons per minute in fire flow that would be noticed on the east side. There was no water pressure decrease, minimal if any, and since the time of the temporary fixes that have been put in place, we've not received any customer calls related to any pressure issues. Realizing what had happened, we approached the leasehold and asked for an emergency declaration on August 30th, and she graciously approved. Currently, engineering review is underway and preliminary cost estimates are as listed here. On the completed work to date section, Flagger Force was brought in to do the traffic service in that location. It's a state road and a super high traffic volume area. They're just over $4,000. Shoreman Excavating came in for the emergency repair on Saturday, and that was $5,200. And LB Water, they brought out all of the caps and blow-off valves for us. And I'd like to kind of, mention that they came at 1 o'clock in the morning that Friday night to bring us the equipment we needed with no additional charge. And that was around $2,000 for all of the equipment they brought. Work yet to be completed. Currently, AJ is working with HDR for engineering support at roughly a cost of $52,000. And what they're doing is they're engineering a permanent fix that they can put in place and line the pipe running through the bridge itself. And the very last component of all of this is the actual construction contractor, which is still TBD. And the estimate for that is $175,000. So the total estimate for the repair work to the bridge is just under $240,000, and the final repair date will be scheduled as soon as possible. I'm asking the board of directors to approve this declaration retroactively to August 25th, 2023 to cover expenses that have already been incurred, as well as upcoming work to properly restore water system to the east side of Allentown and waive standard purchasing guidelines as a result of acting as expeditiously as possible to address this emergency.
Hey, Chris, this is Brian. I don't see any contingency in the estimate of the work to be completed. Shouldn't you have a little bit of wiggle room in case the costs go and exceed what your estimates are?
Yes, sir. We can certainly add in some contingency money there.
And just as a,
10,000.
Chris, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, quite all right, please.
I was just going to comment that the declaration of emergency is really more about the purchasing guidelines than the dollar amount. It's nice to have the dollar amount in there as a reference point of what we think is going to happen, but the real thrust of the approval is to waive the purchasing guidelines so that we can go ahead and do what we should.
I have a question. I don't know if I heard him correctly, but this pipe's 100 years old and we're gonna try and line it. Should we not be trying to replace it entirely?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Oh, go ahead, AJ, you got it.
Oh, Chris, go ahead. Take it.
No, I was gonna reference AJ anyway. So Jeff, when they built this bridge, they did not leave us, it's directly encased in the bridge itself. So we cannot change the pipe. We can't remove the pipe or fix or dig in and remove the pipe in any way, shape, or form. So the next best solution is to line the pipe. And AJ, you can talk about the company that you're working with to come and do that if you'd like for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's an engineered liner, so it's basically has a good life to it and allows us to line all the way through the fittings so that if there is any issues with those fittings down the road, we're not gonna have another leak. The liner gives us like a backup to that. It's a pretty good solution for bridge type work. We're also replacing the 45s that are there, and we're putting in a adjustable system as well as part of that connection. So we should be in good shape on both the west side and the east side.
I didn't know if it was hung from the bridge It's not, so it's actually encased in.
It's right in there. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, honestly, Jeff, when we went to it initially, we were kind of cavalier about it, expecting it to be enclosed in a sleeve, you know, and our thought was worst case, we would just replace the whole run. And once the excavation began and we realized that it was literally enclosed in the bridge itself, that's when we sort of panicked a little bit.
Got it, thank you.
Hey, Chris, did you say that you want this, retroactive to August 25th when the actual event occurred? Okay.
Yes, sir. We had crews on site the night of August 25th through August 26th, as well as shoremen on site the 26th.
All right, thank you. So do you want a contingency or just, so we don't have to worry about the contingency on this one?
I don't think that you do, Mike. I don't know if you have any alternative opinion, but
Just for reference, the green document has a contingency. So that's another emergency declaration.
yeah.
Well, I guess when I see the construction cost at 175, does that include a contingency? I mean, that's kind of a round number to begin with. So does that include, is that conservative?
It's fairly conservative. I mean, you could argue that you could add a contingency in there, just.
My only concern is that if it exceeds the amount and we've only authorized so much, we have to do something different or.
You're not really authorizing the dollar amount.
Okay.
You're authorizing the emergency declaration so that we can do what we need to do without going through the purchasing process.
All right, so then it's a moot point.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's leave it the way it is.
And it says estimated too on the aspects.
All right, so we wouldn't be able to hold, we wouldn't have to hold you up. All right, so we have before us a emergency declaration retroactive to August 25th for a total amount of $238,271.46.
Estimated.
And estimated. All right,
I'll make the motion, Sean.
all right, thanks, Sean. Motion by Sean,
I'll second.
seconded by Jeff. Beat you to it, Mark. Any questions? Okay, let's see. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
All right, thanks, Chris. Have a good conference up there. All right, moving on. All right, wastewater is the next topic. Allentown Division Emergency Declaration, Klein's Island Wastewater Treatment Plant Primary Settling Tank Sludge Removal. Seeking approval, the green document in our board package, digital board package pages, and 8 to 9.
All right, Andrew.
Thank you. So this emergency declaration is due to a buildup of sludge at the Klein's Island wastewater treatment plant. From the end of July, and basically all throughout August, due to a mechanical failure at the pre-treatment plant, a large amount of sludge was discharged from that plant, which made its way down to Klein's Island, and it started to build up in our primary settling tanks. Due to the nature of the sludge, it was not easily removed. So sludge blankets continued to rise in those tanks. And the issue with that is, as that sludge builds up, you then have carryover of organics and solids, which go to the next treatment process, which is the primary trickling filters. Once the organic loading to those filters begins, nitrification sharply decreases. So with that being said, we realized that there was a pretty good chance that we would be exceeding the ammonia limit, specifically for the month of September. We needed a way to get rid of all that sludge. So what we did is we contracted a company called Mobile Solid Solutions. And what they're doing is they came on site, they used some of our pumping equipment, and they have a mobile belt press. So they're taking that sludge, they're adding polymer, and then they're pressing the water out of that sludge, and then we are then hauling it to the landfill. Typically we do landifier biosolids, but these do not meet those requirements. So it is being disposed of at the landfill. They've been on site since September 8th. So with this, we are estimating around 208 dry tons of solids in those settling tanks. There's a unit cost applied to that, as well as the disposal of those wet tons. And we are estimating it to come out to be approximately $374,633. So with that being said, I am asking for approval of a retroactive emergency for the dewatering of the sludge.
This is the same thing we talked about at the last meeting, right?
Correct.
But you didn't have the numbers. That was. Right.
Yeah.
I did want to just note a typo that we have in here. So we added the contingency in because we thought that there would be potentially some additional costs there, but we didn't add it into the paragraph that's below there. So the paragraph says $340,000, but the total in the chart says 375, and it's the 375 is what we're expecting.
Okay. That was one of my questions. That's my fault. All right. Anything else, Andrew?
Okay, any questions?
Little explanation last meeting. All right, need a motion for emergency authorization retroactive for the emergency declaration, primary settling tank sludge removal. Total of $374,633 estimated. I have a motion and a second.
So
Motion by Amir, second by. Right, Beckles. Okay,
Who got the second on that one?
that was Linda. Sorry, Mark. Over 2. Was that Sean? Okay, sorry. Okay, 1-1. All right, we have a motion and a second for this emergency declaration retroactive activity. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Also under wastewater, Clients Island wastewater treatment plant, main and auxiliary pump station improvements. Seeking approval to the salmon documents in our board package, digital board package pages 10 to 20.
Okay, thank you. I'll introduce the project and then Amy Rohrbach, Capital Works Project Manager, is going to present the details. So this project is consistent with the ongoing Act 537 planning for the region. The purpose of this project is twofold. It's to provide asset management related upgrade to replace equipment that is at the end of its service life in the main pump station and the auxiliary pump stations at Clients Island. And the second purpose is to increase the wet weather treatment capacity to 100 million gallons per day. The main pump station, the pumps in the main pump station are about 60 years old. And the associated piping and valves predates the upgrade that occurred in the mid-60s to replace those pumps. That piping and those valves are corroded. They are in need of replacement. The pumps need to be replaced. And in the auxiliary pump station, those pumps are about 50 years old. And that equipment was also determined to be at the end of its service life. These projects are near-term projects in the master plan, last performed in 2019. The main pump station upgrade is project number 1 in the near-term project. And the auxiliary pump station upgrade is project number 2 in the near-term projects from the master plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Rohrbach, who will walk you through the details, and she has some pictures to show you some design phase work that's going to occur to model the station.
You can check.
Yeah, you can put it up.
Okay.
As Chuck already said, the goals are to increase our pumping capacity from 87 million gallons per day to 100, which will reduce our frequency of outfall 003 during wet weather events, extreme wet weather events, not all wet weather. And also get rid of the 1960s vintage pumps, increase the or eliminate the need for the vacuum prime system, which we have in the main pump station, as well as we said, increase the capacity. So We can go to the next slide. So how we're gonna do that? We're gonna replace the 4 existing main pumps. They'll be about the same size, 20 MGD, but instead of the current pumps that are there, they're gonna be vertical turbine pumps, which will eliminate the need for the vacuum prime. New motors, VFDs, and then the auxiliary pump station, we're upsizing those 2 vertical turbine pumps to 40 MGD, which will allow us to have the increased capacity during wet weather. All the necessary electrical upgrades to accommodate the new pumps, the larger motors for the auxiliary pumps, the new VFDs, and as Chuck mentioned, the valves and the piping, that especially with the main pump station, that's from the 20s, isn't it? It's old, the piping's old. So that's gonna be upgraded. There's some structural modifications that are gonna be needed in the main pump station because the new pumps are gonna be at different, their motors are at a different level, so they're gonna need to build a new platform. So there's structural improvements. We're gonna eliminate a bottleneck. There's a hydraulic bottleneck within the force main. So with the piping improvements, that'll get eliminated, as well as HVAC modifications for the larger pump motors and the new VFDs, the increased heat that those generate. So that is pretty much what we're doing at the plant. But per the Hydraulic Institute, it's recommended that pump stations of this size have hydraulic modeling, physical modeling. We already performed some computer modeling, but now we're looking into doing this hydraulic modeling, and Kleinfelder is partnering with Clemson Engineering Hydraulics, which is a national recognized top in their field for hydraulics analysis. And they have a large facility in South Carolina where they will do physical modeling. And these are some pictures. There's another slide with more pictures, similar to what they're going to do for us. These aren't obviously our model because it hasn't been built yet. But these are similar models. So they will model the hydraulics to make sure that everything is going to work properly from a hydraulic standpoint. So, any questions?
If I could just add, one of the reveals from doing the physical model is so you can predict how the different pumps will interfere with each other, because there's a phenomenon called vortexing where the pumps pull in and it can cause cavitation, water entrainment in the pump, which can impede your pump performance and also damage your impellers. So the physical modeling will determine like what sort of baffling we need, what the maximum capacity of the pumps should be, the separation between the pump suctions, that sort of thing.
And the work will also include updates to all the cost estimates that were done about a year ago for all 3 projects associated with the wet weather improvements. So the main and auxiliary pumps, the intermediate pump station and MCC upgrades, as well as the tertiary bypass project. So all 3 of those projects will have construction costs updates.
And though those projects appear in the capital plan, they're listed as 3 separate projects. But when we go to construct this, we will probably bundle them all into one large multi-contract project.
How scalable is lab flow dynamic CFD compared to when you have, large pump? We're talking about cavity, and so I'm just trying to see how much confidence we have on scalability of laboratory to the large scale.
That's a good question. I know we should have more accuracy beyond the computer model. It should tell us more than what's been done so far has been a conceptual computational fluid dynamics modeling. And according to the Hydraulics Institute and some engineers, particularly Kleinfelder, the physical model gives you added accuracy, and you can simulate different baffles, different pump station, different pump alignments, orientations, on a scale model, but I don't know the exact accuracy, Amir. I know it's supposedly better than the CFD modeling. This is not something we do often. I mean, because this is a $12.6 million project, we want to make sure that we get it right. And that what we get, that it performs as expected. And the best assurance of that is to do the physical model. It is a lot of money in this preliminary design. The requested amount you see is pretty high. Almost half of that is a physical model.
I would just add to that, I've never actually dealt with the physical model, but I've actually never worked on a project with 100 MGD pump station. I've worked on, and that's kind of the rule that I've been familiar with, you know, a small pump station, there's no modeling done, sometimes not even computer modeling, right? And you might do some computer modeling or maybe a finite element analysis or something. And then for the real big stations, this type of work gets done, but I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think for the investment compared to the overall capital cost, it's worth the effort.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that. I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to interject, and just so you're aware, the existing pumps did have their impellers cut down because there was cavitation, so we don't want to see that again.
Yeah, no, I'm not looking for accuracy. I'm looking for scalability. Can we scale or not? You know, Lehigh, sometimes I'm out of touch with them for 7-8 years. You know, they have a lot of good people with a lot of CFD background and so on and so forth. Is that something we want to talk to them to increase our confidence? I don't know, you know, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the system. I'm just asking for the scalability.
Yeah, I'll just add that, so the CFD work was done by AECOM. It's highly specialized work. So it's work that you need to have experience with. It's pretty sophisticated modeling. And I don't know if Lehigh has that experience, but I know AECOM does. And as far as scalability goes, we were using the tool mainly as a screening tool to see if we could even get the vertical turbine pumps to work. Because we really were concerned about the vacuum primes and using an old technology. Why, you know, so we want to use it for screening. The results were good. I think some people thought they were good enough to go ahead for design, but most people thought the prudent thing to do was to build a physical model to make sure. Just to make sure. I mean, the CFD modeling is good, but most of the experts said do a physical model to verify it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So we have before us, capital project authorization for preliminary design and physical modeling for a total amount of $286,060. That includes a professional services authorization with Kleinfelder for $266,060. This is for the Pines Island wastewater treatment plant, main and auxiliary pump station improvements, preliminary design and physical modeling. Do I have a motion and a second?
Make a motion.
Chairman, I'll second that motion.
John made the motion, seconded by Mark. All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here and presenting. I do have a question back on, sorry, this is for the solicitor resolution number 9/2023-1. I did not do a specific voice count on that. We had,
I think it's okay.
is it okay?
Yeah.
All right, so we did not have any objections, no abstentions. So 7 members present, 7 yea. All right, thank you. Just want to make sure. Okay, moving on, then we have round of the action and discussion items. We're into monthly financial review.
Yeah, so the monthly financial review and the monthly system operations reports, both of those would be distributed later on this month because this meeting is earlier than usual. So, if that's all right, we'll just
That's fine.
review those and post them online.
All right, thank you. Drop the hook. For the moment.
Well, not totally off the hook, but yeah.
Other staff comments?
And so we have one item that is an informational item we wanted to share with everyone about the pension minimum municipal obligation. That's hard to say, MMO for short. That was emailed to everyone and we have physical copies were distributed here. For the folks who are on Zoom, you'll get a paper copy in the mail along with your budget packet. Essentially, this is a requirement that we inform the board once a year by the end of September of what our future pension obligation is going to be in the upcoming plan year. And it shows the calculation of that on the backside of the submission to you. So another supplemental piece I wanted to share with you, I have some handouts and we can email this out as well. Ed and I collaborated on this morning. You just want to take one and pass. Regarding the funding status for the pension, we just heard from our auditors. Pass those down to us so they can go that in. The pension was described in our audit that we heard just last week about as being having a nice overfunding status, but yet we're still showing we're paying an additional amount toward the unfunded portion, and wanted to give you a little bit of details on that. So for the folks who are on Zoom, just to give you an idea of what we handed out, and we'll email out to you, shows that in 2017 we were underfunded on our pension by a fairly significant amount. We were our percent funded was only 83.5%. That was a kind of a legacy holdover of when we completed the lease transition in 2013. We did not achieve full funding through that lease transition, and it's taken quite some time to catch up. So over the years from what we're just showing 2017 forward, we managed to achieve full funding, and we're actually overfunded at this point up to 112%. That's the data that was in the audit that you received last time. So, so we're in a really good position with our pension obligation and the funding status. The issue with the catch-up portion that we're paying now is really a time delay that PMRS does an audit every 2 years and is prospective. So they'll catch up next year and show and reflect the overfunded status next year when we receive the MMO next year. Ed, do you have anything else you wanted to say about this?
No, I mean, they will catch up, and quite frankly, at some point in time, next year, I would expect that $554,000 becomes nothing. Yes, because we are in an overfunded position now, so there's no reason to amortize underfunded, if that's the case, so.
We have seen in prior years, prior to the lease and this situation happening, we have seen the opposite happen where they've actually deducted from what our pay-in is to the pension program and reduced it because we've been overfunded. So it's kind of a balancing over time to try to hit that sweet spot of, you know, between 95 and 105% funded. So
and some of that really depends on what kind of real rates of return you got. They got a guarantee, but you know, you can do better, you can do worse. So, and actually we haven't been doing too bad.
So we listed this, we just listed this under, we didn't even list it, we just covering it under staff comments because it's informational, something we're required to give to the board, but wanted to give a little bit of background because you had just received the audit information last week. Well,
Okay, it's a very good position to be in for all the employees. Really good news. Thank you.
I said I only had one item under staff comments, but just another real quick. Because we've presented the budget now back to back, 2 weeks in a row. We're coming back on October 9th with some refinements and the sort of final numbers. Would really appreciate any board feedback to be sent to me between now and then, so we can incorporate any changes or modifications, or if we need to present additional information on the 9th. By the time we get to the October 9th presentation, we would like the numbers to be as final as they can be. So just request the board look at the information that we shared and pass anything on to me that you have.
Okay,
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Solicitor comments.
No comments, thank you.
Any comments by the public on any topics whatsoever?
No, thanks, Brian.
No, thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Jenny and Brian, for being here. Okay, board member comments? All right, I have some announcements to make. I actually wanted to do this at the beginning of the meeting, but it's appropriate to recognize additional awards that LCA has received in recognition for September of 2023. The first is a 2023 Municipal Authority Communication Award. LCA was selected for the 2023 Municipal Authority Communications Award by the PA Municipal Authorities Association for the team's work on digital communications and technology integrations in LCA's customer communications program. Through the teamwork of our communications, customer care, IT, and GIS departments, LCA has rolled out a series of digital tools to help communicate important customer information. This includes the development of an interactive outage map on LCA's website, which is widely used by customers and LCA staff during emergencies to share information about the location, duration, and nature of the emergency. The 2023 Municipal Authorities Communication Award will be presented by PMAA at their award banquet tonight. I guess that's what's up in Poconos tonight. With our communications manager, Sue Sampson, receiving the award on LCA's behalf. And one more, area-wide optimization award, AWOP award. The Allentown Division Water Filtration Plant has recently earned the prestigious area-wide optimization award for the 16th year in a row. The AWOP award is earned by achieving strict treatment parameters set through our participation in the American Water Works Association's Partnership for Safe Water Program, which is talking about the clarifiers turbidity and the effluent turbidity. This achievement is made possible by the teamwork of the plant operations staff, led by plant manager Steve Letko and assistant plant manager Chris Emick, and the team of treatment plant operators who manage this important facility on a 24/7, 365 basis. LCA staff will be presented with this award at the Waterworks Operators Association meeting coming up later this month. Those are two recognitions of outstanding work by the staff. We're very proud of everything that the staff is doing. We have a great operation here and want to keep it that way. And it's nice when others are recognizing how good we're doing. So thank you, everybody, for all your efforts in his behalf of recognition of LCA's activities. All right, no executive sessions coming up. At this point in time, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.